Hey, what's up guys and gals? My name is Ricknineg. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be taking a look at Gilligan's Island. More specifically, we're going to be looking at the cast. Now in this fact or fiction episode, have you ever thought about the names of the characters on Gilligan's Island? We all know them. We all know the song Gilligan, the skipper to the millionaire, and his wife, the movie star, the professor, and Mary Ann. Or the rest, depending on what season. They were either Professor or Mary Ann. Now here's an interesting tidbit. Some people think that a lot of these characters don't have full names. Now let's go through them. I think it's important to look at this, and then we will debunk whether this is a myth or maybe it is true. Well, let's begin by the names that are introduced to us through the song itself. First, we begin with Gilligan. We have one name that describes an individual. No real first or last name. We're going to assume it's his first name, but as we get more into this, we're going to find out some things that you may be surprised to hear. Let's begin with Skipper. The Skipper, or just hey Skipper. The name Skipper, but we never really hear of a name. Now, obviously, his mom and dad didn't give him the name Skipper, but we can dive into this in just a little bit. Let's go through the line. Now we have the married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Howell. No real mention of their name, just Mr. and Mrs. Let's continue on with Ginger. Of course, no real last name there, just Ginger. And then we have the professor. Of course, very similar to the skipper in that you have this name that describes what they do. Both the professor, that he's of course a teacher, and then we have the skipper, that he's a boat captain. And so after the professor we have Mary Ann, which of course isn't a first and last name, it is a first name, it's a two-part first name, but that's about it. But is there an instance where we actually get the entire name of these characters? Well, let's go with some of the simple ones, and that is Ginger. Let's start with Ginger. Now, if you watch several of the episodes, you will notice that on the radio and in many other ways, they call her Ginger Grant. And this is seen in multiple episodes. It's probably one of the most said first and last names on the show because, of course, she was a movie star, and movie stars are usually known Rock Hudson, Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz, and so forth. And again, this was a common thing. Now let's move on to Mary Ann. Her name, of course, Mary Ann, one name, and then her last name, Summers. Now, her name was said a lot less, her full name. It was said a couple times on the radio, but it was also said by the cast members very, very few times. Now, let's move on to the Howells. And what's interesting about the Howells is that Mr. Howell, you hear Thurston.
Billionaire Thurston Howell III.
And Lovey, which is his wife, they call each other their names. So when they're in their hut in the privacy of their own home, they call each other by their first names, Thurston Howell and Lovey Howell.
Socially prominent wife, the international hostess Lovey Howell.
Of course, the other castaways, out of respect, never call them by their first names. Now let's move on to the three men that are left. That's Gilligan, the professor, and the skipper. Now what's interesting, let's start with the skipper. And the skipper and professor, we can kind of lump them into one. Why? Well, there was really never ever in any episode a revelation of their first or their last names. You're going to have to go to one specific episode. And that's where we get the entire names of every single character on the show. Now in the episode 2 on a raft, this is an episode where we have both the skipper and Gilligan build a raft and try to get to civilization. Now in the beginning, when they are first stranded on the island, you see, as you see here, and then the radio announcer going through each and every character. Now what's interesting is that we hear a reference to Gilligan, then we hear the skipper, and the skipper is called, according to the radio, Jonas Grumby.
Skipper Jonas Grumby is an old salt in these waters.
What is so interesting about this is that, of course, they all acknowledges it, and so we have to trust the radio announcer that that's his name, Jonas Grumby. Now let's move on to the professor. Now his name is a little more interesting because he was named at the end, a professor, teacher, Roy Hinckley. Professor Hinckley.
Professor Roy Hinckley, research scientist and well-known scoutmaster.
Now, again, if you have not seen this episode or seen it in syndication, you will not know this unless you did a little bit of hunting on your own. But now let's move on to Gilligan. Now, when I was a little kid, I always thought that Gilligan was his first name. That's incorrect. According to Sherwood Schwartz, the creator of Gilligan's Island, He said that this is in fact his last name. His first name? Can you guess it? Do you have any idea? George? John? Philip? Willie. Yes, guys and gals, Gilligan's first name is Willie Gilligan, according to Sherwood Schwartz. Pretty amazing fact, don't you think? So I hope you learned something in this video, guys and gals. You will know that it is a fact that all of the characters on Gilligan's Island were named, and all of this information was released in the series itself. How many of you learned something new about any name? Which one surprised you? And which ones did you already know about? We'll see you next time, guys and gals. Let me know if you want to see more videos just like this, especially on Gilligan's Island. Don't forget to browse my channel. I have other topics that I look forward to. Don't forget to look at my social media, which is the best way to look at what's going on in the world of Ricknineg. We'll see you next time, guys and gals, and don't forget, be hopeful.